Hi, Jeffrey here. So this video will be kind of like a commentary describing my process of this drawing. So as you can tell by the title and by looking, this drawing is of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and this is from how he looks in the Obi-Wan Kenobi TV series. Now I always start these drawings by drawing an outline of the face. In my opinion, the face is by far the hardest part to draw of a person. So I always start with that to make sure I can get it correct. In particular, the hardest part of the face to draw for me is the eyes. So I start with those. And I don't know if you can tell, but this drawing I'm currently working on showing in this time lapse is not the same drawing that I end up completing. So basically what I'm saying is that I messed up. Or at least I felt I messed up on this drawing. I felt like the eyes weren't quite correct. His mouth also wasn't quite correct. And so it's kind of frustrating getting a few hours into a drawing and then basically having to start over. So I didn't record this, but I ended up trying again and messing up again on the same thing, the eyes and the mouth. I ended up starting over again, and what you're seeing on the screen right now is my third attempt at drawing Obi-Wan Kenobi. This time I tried to really focus when drawing and, make sure I get every angle of the eyes correct. And what ended up happening is it ended up looking more like him than the previous drawings. And so I felt I was comfortable enough with the process of this drawing that I felt like I could start continuing from the mouth. Now, backtracking a little to the start of this drawing, this version of Obi-Wan Kenobi drawing, as you can see, I'm currently shading in his eyebrows and nose and trying to capture as much detail as possible. What I do is I have a reference image that I'm looking at, and comparing to what I see in the reference image, I'm trying to draw exactly what I see. And when I say exactly, I mean like every single strand of hair on his eyebrow, every single eyelash, and every single wrinkle on his face. So here I am drawing his beard and mustache, and this part was pretty tricky because there's so much hair, it's so dense that I can't really see exactly each strand, and looking from the reference image to the drawing that I'm doing, it's really hard to follow each strand, but I just tried to slow down as much as possible and then look between the two and, just kind of replicate with my hand and eye coordination. Here I am drawing his cheek, and this part is also tricky because there's a lot of different colors in the skin tone from the lighting, I suppose. And so basically I'm just looking for all the different subtle changes in tone and trying to color that in. So I have several colors, next to me, and what I'm doing is I'm looking at each individual color on his cheek, starting with the lightest color, and then coloring those in using my color pencils, of course, and then starting to shade in the darker colors and slowly blend them in a way that matches the reference image that I'm looking at. And then after I have made sure all the colors are correct, then I will start to draw in the lines for his wrinkles. But I don't always do it in that order. Like, for example, if the lines, like for his beard, are very pronounced, then I will draw them first before coloring in the different tones, just because if I color them in first, it won't show up until later, and it won't show up in the proper order. Basically, it won't have as much emphasis on them as they should have. And so now I'm basically coloring in the bottom of his beard. As you can see, it's changing subtly through each line. Sometimes they're dark, especially on the left side, but then as it moves to the right side, it becomes lighter and lighter based on the lighting. And right now I'm just filling in the rest of his beard. And as you can see, there's slight areas where it's darker, slight areas where it's lighter, and you just have to kind of color all of that in very slowly and carefully. And once I've completed drawing his face, then I start to draw his neck. Now his neck has less hair, so it's more about shading large areas of space than detailing in individual lines, but you can still see there are some hairs in there. So I will occasionally draw in little lines to represent the hairs on his neck after shading in the large areas of space. So as you can see now, I'm shading using different shades of green, and I'm just kind of blending them in slowly, carefully, also adding in a little bit of gray because I saw there were some gray tones. So after drawing his neck, I decided to start drawing the background. Now the background is much simpler. It's just basically shading in large areas of space again, and then of course adding in the little sun there. But there are some subtle color variations throughout the background too. Now this part is tricky. This is his cloak. Now because his cloak has so much texture, I couldn't just shade in the whole thing, quickly. I had to look very finely at the texture and slowly, very slowly, replicate it. And this took a really long time. I mean, I had to look at each fiber, I guess, and make sure I got it correct, and then slowly work my way up from there. All the while, the fiber is slowly changing color. The textures are also slowly changing. So having to constantly switch colored pencils and make sure the fiber is the correct color, the correct shading, the correct alignment. Yeah, it was pretty hard. So here I am continuing to draw his hood and making sure to carefully follow the lines and the seams on his fabric. As you can see, there's a little line there that I just drew. And then around that, it gets darker and then slowly gets lighter. So I have to make sure that the pencils I'm using are correct to match the different tones, or at least as close as possible. As you can see near the front of his hood, I'm slowly drawing the fold in front and just trying to follow the lines as close as possible. And you can see I kind of switch between drawing the fold in the front and drawing the fibers behind that, because it gets kind of tedious, and also they inform each other. Like the front fold informs kind of where I am to follow. It makes it easier to follow where I am in the rest of his hood. As you may have noticed, I have a little note card below my hand. That's to prevent me from smearing the drawing. Because I drew his face first, I have to put my hand where his face is. So in order to prevent that from smearing, I just use a little note card. I know some people use other things like maybe trace paper, but I find a note card works good enough. So it works well enough, and it doesn't cost as much. If you notice, there's all kinds of different patterns in his hood. Some lines are diagonal, some are horizontal, some are vertical, and they all have different lengths, and so a lot of times you have to kind of pause and look at how to draw the next chunk. So that's what I did throughout drawing this portion. I would stop and look and make sure I don't lose where I am in where I see it in the reference image, and then continue drawing from there. And then I just continue that process, basically look at a chunk of fabric, try to replicate it as best as I can using the colored pencils that I have, and then continue, and then look at the next chunk of fabric. And when I say chunk, I mean like about a square inch of space, maybe less, at a time. As you can see, I'm just kind of drawing it in increments. Also, where there's folds or where there's anything to distinguish one area from another, make sure to look at those areas more attentively, because then you can better see and not get lost just in the whole fabric. And then as you can see, it slowly gets darker, especially the front fold. And then the rest of the fold or the rest of the hood behind that slowly gets lighter and lighter because the sun is near that area, so it's shining more brightly. Where the fabric gets really dark, you don't have to put in as much detail because it's all blocked by the shading, or how dark the shading is. So then I don't have to color in as much detail, but then where it's brighter, of course, you need to color in the different details that you see, where some areas get a little lighter, but because the fabric, as I mentioned, is so textured, you can't just shade in lighter and darker. You have to really color each fiber correctly, and then to make sure that the whole fabric looks proper compared to my reference image. So here I am just completing the fabric on this side of his face, and having a balance of larger folds makes it easier to draw, but at the same time, you have to be careful to not lose track of the little fibers as well. Now, once I've drawn that area, the next area I'm going to draw is the right side of his face. On the right side of his face, it starts off very dark. It's because there's a lot of dark shadows and stuff. As you can see, I'm just kind of coloring it in using pure black, but there is a little bit of green in there as well. So you will see me kind of switch between green and black. And then of course there's the lining of the fabric where the texture starts to become more pronounced. And as you see, I'm slowly drawing from top to bottom. And there's changes in tone, and also drawing the background on this side there quickly. As you can see, I'm using some green, and then slowly draw the fibers on the edge, and then slowly draw the lighter fibers on the very edge, and then kind of switching between the three of them, and then also drawing the background. So as I'm drawing from top to bottom, you can see that the color pencils are changing pretty frequently between each fiber, and then just continuing to draw from there. You can see there's a line starting to form in his fiber, so also needing to keep track of that and draw that as well. Now, after that portion is complete, then I start to draw his fabric below his neck. Now this fabric doesn't have as much pattern, which makes it so I can just fill in large chunks very quickly. As you can see, I'm just kind of filling in with one color. I usually start by filling in with the lightest color, and then from there mixing in the darker colors. Once the colors are dark, they can't become less dark, but if the colors are light, they can still be manipulated to better become the color that you need it to be. Influence on the overall color, and it makes it so that you don't have to, because the lighter colors you can easily change, but once it's dark you can't make it lighter, if that makes sense. And then there's a lot of folds in this portion of his fabric, so also having to draw those using a normal pencil, and then switching between a normal pencil and color pencils, I'm slowly shading in the different areas. Some are lighter than others, of course, some are darker, and working my way through the drawing. Now you can see that area near his top of his neck is also very dark. There's a lot of dark tones over there, but then it slowly gets brighter and brighter as you continue drawing, and then you can see that I have completed shading this portion of his clothing. And then I move on to draw the final segment, which is his cloak on the right side. Now this portion is interesting because it gets more complicated as it moves forward into the foreground. And again, like the left side, there are a lot of textures and fibers to pick up. So I just try to pick up as many of them as I can and look between my reference image and my drawing to then match what I see in terms of color, tone, shading, all of those things. So here I'm continuing to draw and match fibers with the reference image. As you can see, it's pretty tricky to follow, but one trick I do have is to look for any fibers that are distinct looking from the ones around them and draw that, and then slowly draw the rest of the fibers around that. That way it's easier to keep track of where you are and not just get lost in the drawing. So I basically just rinse and repeat doing this until I've completed drawing this portion of his fabric. As you can see, there's a lot of different colors that subtly change throughout, and the directions of the fibers are also constantly changing. There you could see I was drawing a particular instance where the fiber looked unique, so then I used that as a reference point. As you can see, I'm doing that here. There's a slight fold in his fabric, so I draw that. And then I connect it to the rest of the fabric that I drew before. from there, I just keep looking for more distinct portions, whether that be folds or fibers that are darker than others, and then slowly draw around that. And I just keep doing that until I've basically completed this drawing. As you can see here, I'm drawing in all kinds of different shapes and filling in the rest of the area. And then, yeah, I've completed the drawing. So of course, after I complete the drawing, I put my signature. I didn't want to affect the drawing, so I put my signature on the back side of the paper and put my name, first name, last name, as well as the date that I completed it. Now, to make sure that I get the signature looking okay, I first draw it in using a pencil, an erasable pencil, so then I can make sure that if I made any mistakes, I can erase them and recorrect them, kind of like an initial outline. And then I draw in the rest using a black colored pencil. As you can see, the first time I draw it in, it doesn't completely fill in everywhere, so I have to, do it again and retrace it a few times before it all gets filled in. And then, yeah, once I've completed that, then what I do is I look through the whole drawing, make sure everything looks good. Do any minor adjustments like erasing some portions or filling in, coloring in a little bit here and there. And as you can see, here's a full view of the completed drawing. There's a lot of fabric surrounding his face, and then of course his face has a lot of hair texture and wrinkles. And then on one side it's more green than the other side. And I used mostly green colored pencils, obviously, but I also used some browns and some yellows and some grays. And then, as you can see, the folds that I drew here with the different shading. And yeah, that's this drawing complete. So thank you for listening. Hope that you enjoyed this commentary explaining the process. And make sure to like and subscribe if you like the content that I create. Thank you.